A man kneels on a dirt floor in a workshop with no windows, only a doorway, and the kind of afternoon light that turns dust into something almost holy. His hands are moving. He is taking 3 thin strands of fiber, flax, maybe, or goat hair, and he is twisting them, pulling them tight, letting them fight against each other, just slightly, just enough. Alone, each strand could not hold the weight of a bucket. You could snap one between 2 fingers without trying. But he keeps twisting, and the tighter he pulls, the stronger the 3 strands become, together. You are about to learn a word that the people in that workshop would have known by heart. A word you have read 100 times in your Bible and have probably gotten wrong every single time. By the end of this video, you will know exactly why we started here on a rope maker's floor and not in a church. Stay with me. It is going to matter more than you think. The word is Qavah, and your Bible translates it as one simple, 4-letter word, wait. Here's the problem. Wait in English means stop. Sit down. Do nothing until the light turns green. We use it for traffic. We use it for the doctor's office. We use it for the moment between ordering your coffee and hearing your name called. It is a word built for boredom. Qavah was never that word. This is not a story about patience. This is not a story about sitting still. This is not a story about doing nothing while the clock runs out. This is a story about being woven. About strands under tension, pulled tight on purpose, until they become strong enough to hold something they could never have held alone. You have waited for things before. You know what it feels like in your chest, the tightness, the ache. The way your mind keeps circling back to the thing you are waiting for. The way time seems to slow down right when you need it to move. Maybe you are waiting right now. For a diagnosis. For a job. For a marriage to heal. Or a child to come home. Or a door that has been shut for so long you have started to wonder if it was ever going to open. Here's what most people miss. The Bible does not tell you to wait the way English tells you to wait. It tells you to Qavah. And 5 men in the Old Testament are about to show you exactly what that word costs and exactly what it builds. One of them will wait 7 days and lose a kingdom because he could not survive the 7th. One of them will wait 2 years in a prison cell because the man who promised to remember him simply forgot. One of them will look back, decades later, and tell you what was happening underneath the silence. One of them will say the word from the middle of a city burned to the ground. And one of them will tell you, finally, what happens to those who wait the way God means it. That they will run and not grow weary, that they will walk and not faint, that they will rise up on wings like eagles. But first, you need to understand the rope. Let's start with a king who could not survive a 7th day. His name was Saul, and he was Israel's first king, and at the moment we are about to look at, his army was falling apart in front of him. The Philistines had gathered at a place called Michmash, chariots, horsemen, soldiers, as many, the text says, as the sand on the seashore. And Saul's men were not standing their ground. They were hiding, in caves, in thickets, in pits in the rocks. Some of them had already crossed the Jordan and run for their lives. The army that started this war with Saul was evaporating by the hour. And Samuel, the prophet who had anointed Saul king with his own hands, had given him one instruction. Wait 7 days at a place called Gilgal. Wait for me. I will come, and I will offer the sacrifice, and then you will know what to do. You can imagine those 7 days. Watching your men disappear one by one. Watching the enemy multiply on the ridge above you. Counting the hours. Day 1. Day 2. Day 5. Day 6. And then day 7 arrives, and Samuel is not there yet. Not late by your standards or mine. Not late by a clock, but late enough that Saul's nerve breaks. He looks at his shrinking army. He looks at the sky, and he decides he cannot afford to Qavah any longer. So he does the unthinkable. He offers the sacrifice himself, a sacrifice only a priest was permitted to make. And the moment the offering is finished, Samuel appears. You have done foolishly, Samuel tells him. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God. And then the sentence that ends a dynasty. Your kingdom shall not continue. One day, that's what it cost him. Not a moral failure, not idolatry, not violence. Impatience. On the 7th day of 7, with the army watching and the enemy massing and every human instinct screaming at him to act. The 1st century Jewish historian Josephus, writing in his Antiquities of the Jews, records this same scene and lands on the same hinge point. Saul could not hold the tension 1 hour longer, and the kingdom was already gone the moment he picked up the knife. Here's what most people miss. Saul wasn't punished for being afraid. Fear is human. He was undone because in the one moment that mattered most, he let go of the rope. Now you understand the word a little better. Qavah, at its root, the Hebrew picture is a cord. Strands being twisted, pulled, held under tension on purpose, so that something weak becomes something strong. Saul let go of the tension one day early, and a kingdom unraveled with it. But it gets stranger, because the next man we're going to look at did not let go, and it still looked, for 2 solid years, like nothing happened to him except being forgotten. His name was Joseph, and before he was anything else, he was a teenager thrown into a pit by his own brothers and sold to traders for silver. You probably know that part of the story. What you may not know is what happened to him after the slavery. After he was falsely accused, after he was thrown into an Egyptian prison for a crime he did not commit. In that prison, 2 of Pharaoh's officials are locked up alongside him, a baker and a cupbearer, the man who tasted Pharaoh's wine before the king drank it, to make sure it wasn't poisoned. Both men have dreams. Joseph interprets both, correctly, down to the day. The baker will die. The cupbearer will be restored to his position within 3 days. And before the cupbearer walks out of that cell, Joseph says something you can hear the hope inside of. Remember me when it is well with you. Please show kindness to me. Make mention of me to Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. The cupbearer is restored exactly as Joseph said. He returns to the palace, to the wine, to the king's table. And he forgets Joseph completely. Not for a week. Not for a season. Genesis says it plainly. 2 full years pass before the cupbearer remembers him. And even then, only because Pharaoh has a dream nobody else can interpret. 2 years. Picture that from inside the cell. Every footstep in the hallway that might be a guard coming to release you. Every day that ends exactly like the day before. You did everything right. You read the dream correctly. You asked, humbly, to be remembered. And the door stayed shut anyway, for 730 days. Stay with me, because here is the part nobody tells you. The text never says Joseph stopped trusting God during those 2 years. It just goes quiet about him. And that silence is the whole point. Qavah doesn't always look like victory while it's happening. Sometimes it just looks like a man in a cell, still alive, still waiting, while the world outside moves on without him. 2 men. 2 waits. One let go a single day too early and lost a kingdom. One held on for 2 silent years and was eventually pulled out of that cell and placed second in command over all of Egypt. In a single day, with no warning, the moment God's timing finally arrived. So pause with me here for 1 second, because there's a pattern forming, and you need to see it clearly before we keep going. Saul had 7 days. He broke on the last one, and a kingdom collapsed. Joseph had 2 years. He held on through all of it, in silence, with no proof it would ever end, and it ended exactly when God intended it to, not 1 day sooner. Same word, same Hebrew root. 2 completely different outcomes, decided entirely by what happened in the final stretch of the wait. If a video like this one is helping you see your Bible differently, hit subscribe before we go further. There are 3 more men coming, and the last one changes everything we've talked about so far. And if you've got a weight of your own running right now, drop it in the comments. I read every one, and I want to know what you're holding on to. Because the next man in this story didn't write about waiting while he was still in it. He wrote about it years later, looking back, after it was already over. His name was David, and by the time he wrote the words you're about to hear, the wait was already finished. He wasn't in the cave anymore. He wasn't running from Saul's spear anymore, or hiding in the wilderness eating whatever he could find, or wondering if the promise God gave him as a teenager, the promise that he would be king, had simply expired somewhere along the way. He was writing from the other side, and this is what he said. I waited patiently for the Lord, and he inclined unto me, and heard my cry. In Hebrew, that first phrase doubles the word. Kavo kivatai, wait, I waited. It's not just a verb. It's intensified, almost desperate sounding, the way you'd say something twice if once wasn't enough to capture it. David isn't describing a calm, peaceful season of trust. He's describing years of gripping the rope with both hands and refusing to let it slip. And then, he says, God leaned down. That's the literal picture underneath, inclined. God bent low. The way you'd bend down to hear a whisper from someone too weak to raise their voice. The wait didn't end because David finally earned it. It ended because God leaned down into the middle of it. Here's something most people never connect. The noun form of Qavah is tiqvah, hope. Same root. Same picture of a twisted cord. And there's exactly one place earlier in the Old Testament where that exact word shows up attached to a physical object, not just a feeling. It's in the book of Joshua, chapter 2. A woman named Rahab, living in the walls of Jericho, hides 2 Israelite spies and helps them escape. And in exchange, she asks for her family to be spared when the city falls. The spies tell her to tie a scarlet cord in her window. The Hebrew word for that cord is tiqvah, a rope, hanging in a window, as a sign that rescue is coming. Hope, in the Hebrew imagination, was never an abstract feeling floating in your chest. It was a physical cord, strands twisted under tension, tied to something solid, hung out where you could see it, holding the promise that you would not be forgotten when the walls came down. David knew that picture, and when he finally writes Psalm 40, looking back at the years of running and hiding and not knowing, he's telling you, I held the cord, and it held me back. Wait, I say, on the Lord. Chazak, be strong, take courage, and he shall strengthen your heart. Wait, Qavah, I say, on the Lord. The grammar itself ties the two together. You don't get the strength without the holding on. But it gets stranger still, because the next man who says this word isn't writing from a palace, looking back at a finished story. He's writing from the ashes. His name was Jeremiah, and you may know him as the prophet who wept. He watched Jerusalem fall. He watched the temple, the actual house of God, the center of everything his people believed about who God was and where God lived, burn to the ground. He watched the walls torn down stone by stone. The survivors marched off in chains to Babylon. The city he loved turned into rubble and ash and silence where there used to be singing. And he wrote a book about it. It's called Lamentations, and it is, almost without exception, the saddest book in the Bible. Listen to how he opens it. How doth the city sit solitary, that was full of people? How is she become as a widow? A funeral song for a nation. You would expect a man writing those words to be finished with hope, done with waiting, done with God, even. And then, 3 chapters later, in the exact middle of that same book of grief, Jeremiah writes this. The Lord is my portion, saith my soul. Therefore will I hope in him. And 2 verses later, that word again. The Lord is good unto them that wait for him, to the soul that seeketh him. Qavah, spoken from a city that no longer exists. Spoken by a man with nothing left to lose and apparently nothing left to gain. This is not a story about people who waited because things were going well for them. This is not a story about confidence or certainty or having all the answers. This is a story about a word strong enough to be spoken in a ruin. About strands that don't just hold when the wind is calm, but hold tighter, specifically, under the worst pressure they will ever face. If Jeremiah could say Qavah from the rubble of everything he loved, it might be worth asking what your own ashes are still capable of holding. Tell me in the comments, which one of these 5 men's waits feels closest to the one you're living right now? I want to know before we get to the last one, because the last one is the reason all of this matters. Now we come to the man who actually uses the word the way it was always meant to be heard. His name was Isaiah, and the chapter he's about to write, the 40th chapter of his book, opens with some of the most famous words in the entire Old Testament. Comfort ye, my people, saith your God. It's a chapter written to a nation that has been through exactly what Jeremiah watched happen. Exile, devastation, the sense that God had simply stopped paying attention. And Isaiah's answer to that despair is strange. He doesn't start with comfort, exactly. He starts by pointing up. Lift up your eyes on high, and behold who hath created these things. That bringeth out their host by number. He calleth them all by names. He's talking about the stars, every single one, numbered, named, by a God whose strength, Isaiah says, never gets tired and never runs out. There is no searching of his understanding. And then, after building that picture, the God who counts galaxies the way you count coins in your pocket, Isaiah lands on the verse that this entire video has been walking toward. But they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Qavah, there it is again, the same word that broke Saul on the 7th day. The same word that held Joseph through 2 silent years in a cell. The same word David doubled when he wrote it from the far side of his own deliverance. The same word Jeremiah spoke from a city in ashes. And now you can finally hear what it actually means. Remember the rope maker, kneeling on that dirt floor at the very beginning of this video, twisting 3 weak strands into something strong? That image was never decoration. It was the definition. Qavah is what happens when you take something that cannot hold weight on its own and you put it under tension on purpose until it becomes strong enough to carry something heavy. That's what waiting on God was always supposed to mean. Not standing still, not doing nothing, being twisted, pulled tight by the pressure of the unanswered prayer, the unresolved diagnosis. The door that still hasn't opened until you come out the other side able to hold weight you could never have held before. Eagles don't get their strength from sitting in the nest. They get it from the wind pressing against their wings, while they hold the shape God built them to hold. That's the picture underneath, mount up. Tension, held, until it becomes flight. Think about what that means for the 5 men in this video. Saul let go of the tension one day early, and the rope simply stopped becoming anything. Joseph held it through 2 years of silence, and it became a position of authority over the most powerful nation on earth. David held it through years of running, and it became a psalm that has comforted broken people for 3,000 years. Jeremiah held it through the worst grief of his life, and it became 3 verses sitting in the exact center of the saddest book in the Bible. Verses that have outlived the empire that destroyed his city. You know what this feels like, even if you've never read a word of Hebrew in your life. Think of a parent in a hospital waiting room at 2 in the morning. Not pacing anymore. They did that hours ago. Now they're just sitting, leaned forward, elbows on knees, eyes fixed on a door at the end of the hallway. Nobody would call what they're doing nothing. Every part of them is awake, alert, present, pulled tight toward that door. They are not waiting the way you wait for a bus. They are Qavah, twisted tight around a hope they cannot let go of, even though letting go would honestly hurt less. That tension is not a sign that God has forgotten you. It might be the exact thing he is using to make you strong enough for what's coming through that door. So here's what 5 men and 1 word want you to walk away with tonight. First, the simple truth. Qavah does not mean what your English Bible has been telling you it means. It is not passive. It is not empty time. It is tension, held on purpose, strands twisted together until something weak becomes something strong enough to carry weight. Second, what that means for you. The weight you are in right now, the one you have not told most people about, the one that keeps you up some nights, is not proof that God has lost track of you. Saul lost a kingdom because he let go one day too early. Joseph gained a nation because he held on through 2 years of silence he never asked for. The difference was never the length of the weight. It was whether the rope stayed in his hands. And third, and this is the one I want you to actually sit with, God is not making you wait the way a stranger makes you wait in a line. Indifferent, looking at his watch. He is on the other end of the rope, holding it with you, pulling the same tension you feel for the exact same reason you feel it, because something is being woven that could not exist any other way. Which one of these 5 weights, Saul's, Joseph's, David's, Jeremiah's, or the eagle in Isaiah 40, feels closest to where you are tonight? Tell me below. I read every single comment, and I would love to know which one found you. A man knelt on a dirt floor once, twisting 3 weak strands into something strong enough to hold weight. You are not falling apart in your waiting. You are being woven.